Welcome to the Mio on MMA podcast. We got a UFC pay-per-view this weekend, UFC 294 from Abu Dhabi. And it's an interesting card. It's a card that honestly was a little bit cursed because obviously you lost the co-main event, the main event, and one of the main card fights, all for short notice replacements. Which is interesting because the short notice replacements would be better fights with full camps. That's my honest opinion, because you got Islam Makhachev, Alexander Volkanovski 2. That's a better fight on paper than Islam versus Charles Oliveira, which was the initial plan, but it's on short notice. Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev. That's a better fight, in my opinion, than Paulo Costa, Khamzat Chimaev, but again, it's on short notice. Ikram Aliskerov versus Warlley Alves is just a full stop worse fight than the planned fight between Aliskerov and Nasruddin Imavov. That's the only one that unquestionably got worse. And it's a weird one because there are some surprisingly wide lines on this card. There are some bettable lines. That being said, full thing. As always, do not bet what you cannot lose. This is MMA. There is no sure thing. There is a lot of lost money on these bets. Don't do it. Don't do it. Risk what you can. Let's get into the fights. I am feeling a little bit hot take-ish on this card, I think. There are some underdogs that my brain is really driving at as a possibility here. Main event is the lightweight title fight. That is Islam Makhachev defending his title against Alexander Volkanovski in a rematch. The fight wasn't that long ago. It is kind of what it comes down to. So instantly, you kind of got to think Makhachev there, the things that work for him in the first fight, which saw him win 3 rounds. Some people even gave him 4 rounds. Are still there. He's still bigger. He's got a pretty good jab. He's a very, very solid wrestler. Even though the wrestling wasn't a big part of what happened, actually it was surprisingly because it was the range and the striking that actually largely got Makhachev the win, ironically, for the first time in his career. But with Volkanovski, you have a guy who is incredible. In my opinion, the best fighter in the world right now, pound for pound. But coming up a weight class, looks notably different in physique than he did when he was fighting Makhachev the first time. So it's obvious he hasn't gone through a certain level of physical beefing up, shall we say, to be ready for this fight. So he's going to be the smaller guy, even more predominantly than in the first fight. He hasn't had the full amount of time you would like to come up with a new game plan, to find new weaknesses, to find ways to implement his game, particularly. And I think he would, because to be clear, I think that in the first fight, he focused very, 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 very heavily on stopping Makhachev's wrestling, that the striking kind of honestly took him by surprise. That's my view of the thing. But I don't think he's had the time. And that's kind of the disappointment here, because if Makhachev wins this fight, as I'm picking him to do, that is going to put him up 2-0. And then, how do you get to a third fight? Because I still really want to see Volkanovski fight him again on a full camp. I really want to see that, because I think it would be incredibly interesting. It's just, that's not what we're getting here. We're getting a short notice replacement fight. So I do have to go with Makhachev by decision. I don't really see how he finishes him, because Volkanovski is incredibly tough and incredibly hard to finish. So I see it going the distance. I see Makhachev winning. This is a relatively short breakdown for a main event, but it's kind of just we saw the fight, and we're not really getting the circumstances, the background that is going to lead to great deal of differences, changes, improvements, and so on. But I'm sure we'll see something. I'm sure we'll see something different. And of course, it is late notice for Makhachev as well, but I don't think Makhachev is the one that loses out on that prep time, because I think what he wants to do to virtually anybody has a fair amount of similarities to just what he wants to do to anybody else. Like, it's still going to be, he's going to, want to work his jab a little bit. He's going to want to get takedowns if he can. He's going to want to do those kind of things. And the late notice replacement doesn't really hurt him there because, and to be clear, the big thing that doesn't hurt him is obviously like he was prepping for a 155 cut. He's fighting at 155. Volkanovski was prepping for a 145 cut and fighting a very different opponent in Ilia Topuria, and now suddenly he's up a weight class and fighting a guy that beat him. That's a tough one. And the betting odds are pretty reasonable. Makhachev minus 250 to minus 295. Volkanovski plus 200 to plus 230. So, it's a bettable line. That's enough of an underdog that if you think Volkanovski is going to find some key things to turn in his favor, it's on the table. And if you want to bet on Makhachev, under minus 300 is still pretty good for a UFC champion, honestly. So, bettable line, interesting fight. It's just, I have a hard time seeing the short notice nature of the fight working in favor of Volkanovski. And of course, the guy I feel bad for is Mateusz Gamrot, because he was the standby guy. And I know why he didn't get picked, because this is a UFC pay-per-view with only one title fight that lost its main event and its co-main event. And what are you going to do? You're going to put on a main event of a pay-per-view and expect people to buy it, of Makhachev versus Gamrot, with like a kind of weird co-main event? It's a bit of a problem. So like, obviously they went with the bigger name, with Volkanovski, champ versus champ, trying to beef it up a little bit. Gamrot's not happy about it. He shouldn't be happy about it. Hopefully the UFC does him a solid. Hopefully. Because my understanding, he is still the backup, which is going to be really, really weird, because if Volkanovski pulls out of this fight like in the next 2 days and we still get Gamrot versus Makhachev, that would be hilarious. That's not an interesting fight, of course. Makhachev wins that all day, but still. Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev in the co-main event. I find this more interesting than the original fight because I've said this. I'm not a big believer in Paulo Costa. I never really have been. Like, don't get me wrong. The fight he had with Yoel Romero, phenomenal fight. Great fight. Loved it. Great. But other than that, it's like it's losing to Vettori, losing to Adesanya in embarrassing fashion, going life or death with Luke Rockhold, who's ancient at this point, and I don't think wants to. I think wants to fight, but like instantly doesn't want to fight once he gets in there. Is not a great look, but we're not getting that fight. We're getting Usman. Now, of note, Usman appears to pop something in the open workouts. Is it serious? I don't know. It might be nothing. It might be something. We'll find out. Or maybe we won't. Maybe we won't. But I think even without that, I probably would pick Khamzat Chimaev. It's kind of weird because Kamaru Usman's had one bad fight. The third fight with the Leon Edwards. And we're kind of like writing him off as kind of done. But it's the backdrop to that. It's the knee problems, the lack of them, going up in weight to fight bigger guys. I know it's kind of weird saying that because like Chimaev is a former 170er who's going up to 185. And Usman's a 170 guy going up to 185. So it seems like, no, they should be like the same size. But it's like Chimaev was an insanely big welterweight. Usman was certainly big at welterweight. Don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. Man is 6 foot tall and like, jacked. But like for comparison purposes, Chimaev is even taller than him, 6'2", and even bigger. So, there is that. I don't know. I can't trust Usman's body to still be bringing it at this point. Like, he is still by far the best wrestler that Chimaev has fought. He may honestly be the best striker that Chimaev has fought, which is kind of sad. Let me see here. Better strikers than Usman. I mean, I guess Kevin Holland. I guess. But like Gilbert Burns is worse. The Leech is worse. Gerald Mershard is worse. Reese McKee is worse. John Phillips is worse. And then we're getting back into like the days where he was beating up a bunch of guys who were just not very good. We'll talk about one of them later in Ikra Alaskarov, but that's about it. So it is the biggest challenge of the career of Chimaev. And I think if you put this in a full camp segment, this would be an incredibly interesting fight. But we have Chimaev, who is prepping for a fight. Probably has a fairly similar game plan for Usman as Costa, because he likes to go out there and smash. He likes to go out there and essentially be a bully. A technical bully, but a bully nonetheless. And he's fighting a guy who, even if it's only one fight that he's looked shaky in, does feel like a guy who is towards the end of his rope. Towards the end of his run as an elite fighter, and we'll see what happens after that. So I am going to have to go with Chimaev to win this fight. The size, the physicality, the physical health, the primeness of him that Usman doesn't really have anymore. And we'll go with that. But I fully think that we'll see Usman have some moments, because Chimaev is not great technically as a striker, nor is he even particularly great technically as a wrestler. He's very physical to back that up, though. And I'll pick him by decision, but a finish wouldn't surprise me. It's just, I think the way that you finish Usman is by striking and by doing something creative and unpredictable. And what Chimaev does is not unpredictable. It's the equivalent of a battering ram through the front door. It's not subtle. It's not unexpected. It's not unseen. It's just powerful. And I don't see him being able to submit Usman. So we'll probably go the distance. I wouldn't be surprised by a finish. I wouldn't be surprised if Usman just looks terrible. But Chimaev is a minus 275 to minus 320 favorite. Usman plus 215 to plus 250. I will say the idea that Makhachev is a smaller favorite than Chimaev is, some of that kind of just fits a little bit weird to me, given that Makhachev has actually beaten Volkanovski. But I do. On the other hand, I do kind of get it. Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. There are two ways this fight goes. Option A, Ankalaev remembers what he is, which is a phenomenal wrestler and grappler for the 205 division. And he goes out there, he puts the pressure on Walker, breaks him down, puts him on the ground. And I mean, if you could be out wrestled by Thiago Santos, you can be out wrestled by Magomed Ankalaev. Like that's all it comes down to it. Takes him down, out scrambles him, probably subs him, probably TKOs him. I don't know. Something along those lines. Stops Johnny Walker, generically speaking. Or option two, Ankalaev continues to do kind of what he's been doing lately, which is this kind of boring kickboxing thing, which is, reasonably technically sound, getting victories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's fine, but it's less definitive than the wrestler grappler version of Ankalaev. And it's an area that Johnny Walker is actually fairly comfortable doing, but is undergoing his own transformation, and it's pretty much complete, where he's gone from being this like very dangerous, dynamic striker, who admittedly was very, very easy to finish as well, because there was like defensive deficiencies everywhere, to going to SBG Ireland, becoming a student of John Kavanagh and the other coaches there, and working this kind of low kick game / low output / very repetitive and predictable striking game that Ankalaev probably could just take apart. So, like, Ankalaev probably wins either version of this fight. So, I'm taking Ankalaev. I'm going to take it by TKO to get a stoppage against Johnny Walker. It's not that I think Johnny Walker is bad. It's just that I think at the very, very top of the division, Johnny Walker has gone from being a fragile glass cannon that was dangerous to just about anybody to being kind of neutered and kind of pared down into this low diversity, low dynamicism, low power version of himself. And it's a lot less interesting to watch. I will say that. But it has led to, like, ironically, it has led to more reliable success for Johnny Walker. But at the same time, it takes away the one thing that he kind of had for a guy like Ankalaev, which was that scary dynamic physicality that he no longer is really making use of. So, yeah. Ankalaev by TKO. He is a massive favorite at minus 350 to minus 390. And that Walker is a plus 275 to plus 285 underdog. I would stay away from that line. I guess if you want to bet on Walker at underdog odds, it wouldn't be ridiculously bad or anything. But Ankalaev is too much of a favorite to bet on, in my opinion. But like by the same token, he really should win this fight. But I guess there is one X factor to talk about, of course, is he seemed incredibly pissed off, as did, of course, Ramazan Kadyrov, about him losing, or, well, not losing, but drawing with Jan Blachowicz and not getting the UFC 205-pound title. Interim belt, admittedly. But, or no, was that the interim belt? Or was that the real belt? I think it was the interim belt. I think it was the interim belt when, no, because Glover and Jamal Hill was afterwards. So it would have been for the real belt. And I admit he did kind of get robbed because I think he should have gotten 10-8s basically in the first 2 rounds. But like at the same time, I don't think you can fall apart as badly as he did in the last 3 rounds of his fight with Blachowicz and really get mad when you lose. Or pardon me, fault. It was other way around. The early rounds went to Blachowicz. The later rounds went to Ankalaev. You have to get into the fight before the 3rd round. Ikram Aliskerov versus Warlley Alves. Aliskerov is, and I'm going to be doing this a lot because something that bugs me about MMA right now is that ever since Khabib Nurmagomedov came in and did his thing, basically anyone that comes out of like the Chechnya, Dagestan region, or has a remote blessing of people of that region, they tend to get overhyped ridiculously. Like Ikram Aliskerov, who I did pick to beat Phil Haas, I want to make that clear, is a guy who is like literally being hyped off of losing to Khamzat Chimaev and then looking incredibly awkward and clumsy as a striker against Phil Haas and getting the win because Phil Haas is Phil Haas. So I find him incredibly heavily overrated. Don't get me wrong. There's some decent stuff. Like he beat Dennis Thielun and he beat Nanshan Burrell before he got to the UFC. That's not bad. That's about as much as you can do as a middleweight. But he is really, really, really clumsy. And he's a good wrestler. He's a good grappler. There's a lot to build on there. But I think that like it's almost like he is ending up as the Usman Nurmagomedov to Khabib, but in his case, it's him to Khamzat Chimaev, where it's like, oh, he's going to be the next Chimaev. Why? 1, he lost to Chimaev. 2, he doesn't have the physicality of Chimaev. He just does not have the physicality of Chimaev. He's not a bad athlete. He's an above average athlete. He's a scary athlete. He's got decent power. He's got good strength. He's got conditioning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don't get me wrong, but like, you take Khamzat Chimaev, that's a freak. That's a once-in-a-generation physical talent. And Aliskerov is not that. And you add to the fact that he has incredibly clumsy footwork and technical striking. And he's probably going to lose at some point. Now, I don't think it's going to be Warlley Alves. Warlley Alves is coming in on short notice here for Nasruddin Imavov. He's coming up a weight class. He's 1-3 in his last 4. He's not looked good in some time. He's a guy who, at welterweight, did utilize a size advantage pretty effectively. He's only 5'11", which is not huge, but like, dude was a big welterweight. And a guy who relied a lot on like physical athletic gifts. And yeah, Aliskerov should be able to wrestle him, should be able to out-grapple him, should be able to, dominate him on the ground, basically. Work towards a TKO, perhaps, just because Alves doesn't generally get submitted and is actually, a pretty good grappler in his own right. Very solid defensive grappler. But like, it is coming. like that moment is coming when Alaskarof's like complete woodenness and like lack of coordinated footwork is going to burn him. I just don't think it's here. Like, I think, he'll slam an Alves and probably put him on his back and TKO him. There you go. Alaskarov minus 599 to minus 670 as a favorite. Alves is plus 425 to plus 475. Do not bet on Alaskarov, for the love of God. Do not bet on anyone like who's at like minus 600. Like that would be honestly my take. But if you're going to bet on it, like a small bet on Alves, I guess. And then like take everything I said and then like apply it to Saeed Nurmagomedov. Now, to be clear, it's a different thing with Saeed. Saeed is, actually fairly coordinated with his footwork and his striking and so on. Creative, not wooden. But he's another guy that like, his last name's Nurmagomedov. He's got to be amazing. He's got to be really, 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 really good. And I said it when he, beat Saeed Kakramanov in a fight that he was losing pretty much the whole time. I don't think he's actually that good. And that's going to burn him at some point. And again, I don't think it's this fight, though, because, he is the better striker of the two against Muin Gafarov. He is the better athlete between the two against Gafarov. He is a solid enough wrestler that Gafarov's determined, aggressive, takedown game and insistence upon trying to grapple with somebody probably will not work until the third round. But like the hallmark of Saeed's game is dude gets tired because he gets a lot of comparisons to like Zabit Magomedsharipov. We'll talk about Zabit later on in this fight, on this card as well. But it's true, but like we're kind of ignoring that. Like the problem was Zabit had when he would just get tired, and like Saeed does the same thing without the finishing rate or the dynamic submission grappling aspects that Zabit had. And also at 135, where the average level of for whatever reason, 135 has this higher average level of athleticism than 145, and I don't really have a way of explaining it. But Gafarov is a guy who has lost to Chad Hilger. He's lost to Jan Castaneda. Saeed would have beat those guys because they have physical limitations that Saeed just doesn't have. And Gafarov's probably going to keep trying to take him down. Saeed's going to, do a good job of stuffing it. Probably end up with some top position himself, win the striking exchanges. Also, the fact that Gafarov likes to do like funny spinning stuff in his own right, like he kind of likes to do the same thing Saeed does. And he's just like notably worse at it, will probably hurt him. But Saeed by decision is my pick, because Gafarov is insanely tough. That man has a cinder block for a head. Minus 218 to minus 286 on Saeed, and Gafarov is plus 180 to plus 210. I wouldn't bet on either of those lines, but that is just me. And then Tim Elliott, Mohamed Mokaev. This is a fight that I really want to get saucy with my picks, because let's get to the betting odds. Mokaev is a minus 435 to minus 520 favorite. You people are crazy. You people are insane if you kept betting on this guy at north of minus 400. Jesus. Tim Elliott plus 330 to plus 350. Now, to be clear, let's get this out of the way. Tim Elliott is 36 years old. He's dealing with all kinds of drama with the Glory camp falling apart. Kevin Kroom. His wife cheating on him with Kevin Kroom. There you go. And that's clearly definitely affected him to the point where like he's sponsoring a bare knuckle boxer against Kroom. Like it's very clear that is living rent free in his head. But like this is a guy that admittedly dirty as all heck beat Tadger Ulanbekov, who is very much in the same prototype as Mokaev, but like in my opinion, more diversified as skill, more developed, lesser ceiling, because Mokaev I think is a better athlete. But like Mokaev had a really, really, really hard fight with Malcolm Gordon and Charles Johnson. This is a guy who can get stuck going for takedowns, can be out-grappled. and is not a very good striker. To be clear, very dynamic striker, very impactful striker, very dangerous striker. Just ask Cody Durden, but not a great striker. And I'm just very, very, very tempted to go with Tim Elliott here. I am exceptionally tempted. And I think in a weird way it would be better for Makhachev because every time I see Makhachev give an interview, well, not every time because there's like two different versions of Makhachev. There's Muhammad Makhachev, I'm going to be the youngest champion in UFC history, and there's Muhammad Makhachev is like, I'm fighting guys that are so experienced, and it's amazing that I'm getting this done. It's like, okay, but if you're going to be the youngest champion, you kind of need to do that, and so that's kind of weird. And he did have a messed up leg against Filo. So I don't know. I'm going Tim Elliott by decision. It might be crazy. And he might just get blown up right away, honestly, because I have no idea where his headspace is right now. But like Muhammad Mokhayev's hype train is the thing that bugs me so much about MMA right now. Is just we hype. The hype train is just, it's run away. Like in the past, people had to do something. And Makhachev, it's like the hype train came in before he did anything. He still hasn't done anything. A cool knockout of Cody Durden, notwithstanding. But like, that's it. Like, I don't know. This guy had a competitive fight with Jafel Fio, who I don't think is that good. There you go. I'm going with Elliott. I'll be putting money on it. Muhammad Yahya versus Trevor Peek. This is an ugly fight. Part of me wants to pick Yahya as the more tactical, better form fighter. He has decently quick hands. He has decently good accuracy, decent good timing. But there's no dominant A game to him. Like he's just kind of okay at everything. He's not a great athlete by any means. He doesn't have great defense. Doesn't have a great chin. He got dropped. I watched like 4 fights of his and saw him got dropped 3 times. It's not great. Not a good sign for the chin. And Trevor Peek is a complete mess. And to be clear, I have often described fighters as complete messes. Trevor Peek is peak mess. My guy is throwing like standing hammer fists and stuff. Like this, it's terrible. He's exceedingly confident in himself, exceedingly tough, exceedingly very like has all the physical tools, and of course the unshakable faith in Jesus Christ. That could lead to him being a really, really good fighter. It's just and like it's weird because like people who go to his gym are like defending his coaches, being like, no, they can teach people how to strike. He just doesn't listen. He is coming off a loss to Chepe Mariscal. Maybe we'll see something, but like he is Spike Carlisle without the wrestling game of Spike Carlisle. I am still gonna pick him here because Yahya is just not very good and is pretty fragile. So Trevor Peek by TKO. But like Trevor Peek losing is not something I'm ever going to be surprised by. He's a minus 155 to minus 166 favorite. Yahya is plus 125 to plus 140. And we move on to an infinitely better fight between Javid Basharat and Victor Henry. I really like Victor Henry. He's a creative striker. He fights at a high pace. He has high fight IQ. There's a lot of feints to his game, a lot of setup, a lot of really breaking down what his opponent does and neutralizing it. It's amazing to watch because he's not a very good athlete for the division standards. And normally when I say something like that, it's because I'm picking against them, and that's the case here. The verbal fellatio is just setting up the fact that I think Basharat is one of the more surefire bets on the card because Basharat is also a very creative striker, also fights at a decent pace. He doesn't weaponize it quite like Victor Henry does, but he can fight at a high pace. He can mix in the wrestling. He's got pretty good athletic ability. For example, he did beat Tony Gravely, who's a really, 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 really good athlete, who I would imagine had Victor Henry try to beat him in the way that he did, or try to beat Gravely in the way that that Basharat did, he probably wouldn't be able to do it. Now, granted, he did beat Ronnie Barcelos, which is still a far bigger win than anything that Basharat has done so far. But Basharat is, I think, actually a legitimately hypeable prospect. He's the guy who probably should be getting like the love that Makhachev does. He's a minus 550 to minus 600 favorite, so that's an unbettable line. Henry's plus 390 to plus 450. If you're going to bet Henry, but I'd stay away from it. Cedric Dumas versus Abu Azaitar. This is basically right back into like the peak versus Yaya mold of. I don't think either of these guys are very good. They both have like physical attributes that are positive. Azaitar is a power punching, strong bulldozer of a man. Is it him or his brother that actually has the nickname the Bulldozer? I swear I didn't look it up. No, he's Captain Morocco. Okay. Like he has all the physical ability and whatever, but like there's not really anything tactical or technical behind him. My guy, he goes out there and he just kind of he either nukes you incredibly quickly or he loses. And Dumas is a guy who is pretty athletic. He's also not very good and is used to destroying people with that athleticism, but like he lost to Josh Fremd because Josh Fremd is, while not an amazing technician, he's got like a scrappiness to him. And his Zaitar just basically, I think, will combust, trying to kill Dumas, and then it'll allow Dumas to win. I'm hoping it's a quick fight. I've got Dumas by TKO. He's a minus 225 to minus 250 favorite. And Zaitar is plus 176 to plus 200. Anshul Jubli versus Mike Breeden. I'm very tempted by the underdog here, but I haven't made up my mind. Which is Breeden for the record. The betting odds here are minus 275 to minus 340 on Jubli. Breeden plus 220 to plus 250. I would be betting on Breeden either way because even if I pick Jubli to win, he should not be that much a favorite. Jubli was the Road to the UFC tournament winner at 155 pounds. But none of his fights sold me on him. He fought a Korean fighter by the name of Kyopyo Kim to a split decision, which is what it is. It's a split decision against a guy who's not in the UFC. And then he beat Jekka Saragi, who is just bad. He is a meme fighter. He's notably small for the division. He cannot grapple. He is about like kind of just like fun spinning shit and kick heavy offense, which is not efficient. And yeah, Jubli out wrestled him and smothered him to the ground. And, you know, he's got some things going for him. Like he's got a decent takedown game. He's got a decent jab. Follows it up pretty well with a power straight. But there's no X factor to him. Like he's not a super good athlete anywhere particularly. He has no dominant skill set. He's not super creative or you know, changing it up or anything like that. Things are pretty much at the same speed and kind of repetitive, and you know, he's just not very good. Mike Breeden is also not very good. He relies on being kind of well-rounded and kind of tough, and also he is from that Glory MMA and Fitness and now at Marathon MMA. So like, what's that going to be? And like he is 0-3 in the UFC, but like his losses in the UFC are to just much better fighters than Jubli. Like my guy lost to Alexander Hernandez. Alexander Hernandez is a great athlete. He lost to Terrence McKinney. He's a great athlete. He lost to Natan Levy. He's a great athlete, albeit the most uncoordinated great athlete you've ever seen. And like a pretty reasonable fighter. Like Natan Levy's UFC run, as much as he's kind of a meme fighter, is like, you know, losing to Rafa Garcia, no problem. And then beating Mike Breeden and, you know, Gerard Valdez. Like, it's not bad. I will go with Jubli, I guess. I can't really pick Breeden off of like watching him lose to anybody decent. Jubli at least is undefeated. I haven't seen him lose. I haven't seen him get shut down. I just think the options are there. Like Breeden's got a pretty good Muay Thai background. He's not stunningly good at it, and he's not athletic, but like he should be like the first fighter who maybe can like just disrupt the jab and while also resisting takedowns. But I'll go with Jubilee by decision, but I'll probably put a little bit of money on Breeden. Nathaniel Wood versus Muhammad Naimov. 2 questions about this fight. Number 1, what is it doing so low on the card? Because this is way better than Jubilee Breeden. This is way better than Dumas versus Zaitar. This is way better than Yaya Peak. This is probably better than Elliott versus Makhachev even. This should be higher on the card. It's a good fight. But the other thing is, what is this matchmaking though? Because like Naimov came in as a late notice replacement, knocked out Jamie Malarkey, and now he's getting Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood is coming off of wins over guys like Charles Jourdain and Andre Fili, and is getting Muhammad Naimov. It's weird on paper. It feels like a fight with like very, very little payoff for Wood and a lot of payoff for Naimov. Wood is a little bit concerning because he is a little bit small for 145. He's 5'6". He's not super thick or anything, but like he's very quick. He's got very good timing for counters. He's got a nice mix up of striking into takedowns, which he flows through with fluid grace and works very, very well as a changeup and a fastball to each other. And yeah, he's just one of the better schooled like strikers at 145. Like he is very good. Naimov has got this Taekwondo background, but mixes it with a solid sort of standard Caucasus game. I think he's from Tajikistan, where like he can wrestle. He's got athletic ability. He's got power. It's hard. He's strong. All of these things. Like he can do some things, and maybe even bully Wood a little bit on paper. But this does feel like way too big of a step up for him. Now, granted, I did think he was going to lose to Jamie Malarkey, but like I thought he was going to lose to Jamie Malarkey because Jamie Malarkey is just big. Like in this case, he's the big fighter, and Wood is the technician, the tactical guy, the dude that I really trust in a big way with bringing a well-schooled, well-thought-through game plan to the table because he's very, very good at that. He's not much of a finisher, so I am going to go with the decision, but Wood at admittedly at a minus 325 to minus 350 favorite, and Naimov plus 255 to plus 270 doesn't leave a lot of room for actual betting, but I'm salivating at that fight. Also, come on, Wood is a smaller favorite than like Muhammad Makhachev. Come on, guys. Come on. Hop on the right prospects at least. Come on. Aliskerov's also a bigger one. Jinyu Fry versus Victoria Dudikova. The odds here again are like ridiculously wide. Dudikova's minus 500 to minus 550. She hurt, like Estela Nunez hurt her own arm to get her a win in the UFC. Like, what are we doing here? Jinyu Fry plus 350 to plus 400. Like, I'm picking Dudikova to win because I've made a pledge to not pick Jinyu Fry because Jinyu Fry doesn't insist upon the fight, doesn't fight at a high enough pace to win fights, doesn't fight in a way that leads to finishes, doesn't fight in the way that leads to anything. Like, Dudikova is not good. She is a non-existent striker. She is entirely swing and cling. Drag it to the mat, try to do things. And like, that's Ashley Yoder who Jinyu Fry beat. But like with more physicality than Ashley Yoder, admittedly. But it's like, how is Dudikova minus 500 against anything other than like a complete heavy bag? Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? I know Fry is like bad and the greatest letdown in women's MMA of the last like decade because she has all the physical talent to be good and the technical ability to be good and just actively isn't. I understand that. I get that. I will never bet on Fry, but I'm tempted to. You're tempting me to bet on Jinyu Fry with these betting odds. But I am going to pick Dudikova to win. She'll probably get a takedown in each of the 3 rounds. that'll be the biggest thing to happen in the rounds. She'll bank some top time. She'll get some stuff done. That's it. I don't know. I'll probably be cursing the screen throughout the entire thing. And then Bruno Silva versus Shara Bullet Magomedov. Magomedov is another one who's like, I think really, 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 really overhyped. I think it's just because he spins, but he's not bad. He's a fairly big guy. Like he's a middleweight kickboxer who has decent power, has some ideas for accuracy, has some creativity, scrambles reasonably well as a grappler. So he's not like a guy who's just going to instantly get taken down, held down, and lay down or submitted. Maybe I could see him getting submitted by someone really dynamic, but he's not bad. I want to be clear on that. He's not bad. He's in the UFC. He belongs in the UFC. Like it's good enough to get a shot, but like there are like people like, man, the Bullet versus Bo Nickel for the middleweight title. We're going to have that someday. Unlikely. Really unlikely. But he is good. And Bruno Silva, despite being a super tough guy who actually has a pretty well-rounded skill set, tends to like to fight in the way that is not how he actually wins fights. He tends to like to actually kind of kickbox, when his best way of winning this fight would be to try to take Magomedov down, hold him down, and like work for the aforementioned submission or like pounding him out or something, because he does take risks on the ground, but he'll probably strike with him. He'll probably have massive gaps in his defensive game, and his own offensive striking is very meat and potatoes. And unlike some other flashier strikers, Magomedov, I think, actually does, like, he has an idea of how to deal with like fundamentals, even if like I am unimpressed by his actual fundamentals. If he were to lose this fight, I think it would do him some good. It's kind of one of these weird things, because I've said this about a couple of people, and I'm hoping to see like a better Trevor Peek. Losing a fight is usually what clues you into the fact that what you're doing is dumb or flawed in some way. And that feels like really kind of what the Bullet's doing. That feels like looking up here, what Trevor Peek was doing, what Makhachev is doing. Where it's like, okay, something does actually have to change. And Dudikova will be another example of this. Although with Dudikova, I just don't think she can do particularly better. Like, I think she needs to just get with like new coaches or whatever. I don't know. She's just incredibly raw. Whereas like, the other people I mentioned are like kind of going and like getting to like a hype state. Apparently Dudikova has that too. Anyways, I am going with Shara Bullet to TKO Bruno Silva, because as tough as Bruno Silva is, there's a lot of defensive lacking things he has there, and he tends to consent to a relatively messy kickboxing fight, and that does seem like the exact type of fight that the Bullet can win. He is by he I mean the Bullet is a -250 to -290 favorite, and you got Silva at +200 to +225. So thank you for tuning in. Tune in after the fights on Sunday. I will have the breakdown of what happened, and we'll see what happens. Was on a hot streak prior to last card. Last card, it kind of fell apart a little bit. I have some underdogs to put some money on, and you can check out my links below, to the right, to the left, above, depends where you are, and join me next time.